I think we'll get started. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dr. Sally Blair, Senior Director for Fellowship Programs here at the National Endowment for Democracy. On behalf of NED's Forum for International Democratic Studies, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's presentation, Why Women's Political Participation Matters in the Congo, featuring Reagan-Ficelle Democracy Fellow Passy Mubalama. We are delighted to have with us as a discussant Rudy Masamba, Program Officer for Central and West Africa here at the National Endowment for Democracy. Funded by the U.S. Congress, the Reagan-Ficelle Democracy Fellows Program hosts some of the world's most dedicated activists, scholars, and journalists to conduct independent research and pursue projects here at NED. Now in our 17th year, the program has supported more than 270 fellows from over 90 countries since its founding in 2001. Within this remarkable group, our speaker today stands out for her unwavering commitment to women's rights and democratic values in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Despite participating enthusiastically in political and community life in the DRC, women hold few public decision-making positions. Many have withdrawn from seeking office or getting involved in public life, even though they are disproportionately affected by the civil wars and the resulting humanitarian crises that have plagued their country for more than 20 years. More than 800,000 people have been killed since 2000, and there have been 4.5 million internally displaced people in the same period. Human rights violations and violence against human rights defenders are a grave and ongoing concern, and it is with great sorrow that we note the deeply disturbing news of the death of Luc Kulula, Congolese pro-democracy activist and pillar of the youth democracy movement Lucha, who lost his life in a fire in his home in Goma under suspicious circumstances earlier this month. In her presentation today, Passy will share her experience as a former journalist and current human rights activist in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. She will examine how the current political crisis affects women's rights in the DRC and why the participation of women in politics and security is vital for the prospects of bringing peace and democracy to the country. Passy is a women's rights activist with many years of experience in supporting democracy, human rights, and the rule of law in the DRC. She is founder and executive director of Action and Development Initiative for the Protection of Women and Children, known as AID-PROFEN, an NGO that promotes women's rights in the eastern region of the DRC. In 2016, with funding from NED, she founded the Education Center on Democracy and Human Rights, which organizes trainings and arranges meetings between community and local party leaders in order to bolster women's political engagement. For her notable work to strengthen women's and youth participation in public affairs, she received an award from the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders Initiative in 2014. Rudy Masamba is a program officer at the National Endowment for Democracy, where he oversees grants program for several countries of Central and West Africa, including the DRC and Côte d'Ivoire. Before joining the NED, Rudy worked at the National Democratic Institute, NDI, on portfolios that also encompassed Central and West Africa. He holds a BA in Political Science from Binghamton University and an MS in International Affairs from Florida State University. We will now turn the floor over to Passy, who will speak for approximately 25 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, followed by Rudy for about 10. If you have not already done so, please silence your cell phones. And for those of you on Twitter, you can follow the presentation and contribute to the conversation by using the hashtag NEDEvents or by following the forum at Think Democracy and the endowment at NE Democracy. Finally, let me take this opportunity to thank the many staff members who have been involved with this event, but most especially Research Associate Kabod Mensah, who has offered vital assistance to the Fellowship Project and today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally, for the introduction. My name is Passy Mubalama. I'm a pro-democracy activist and a human rights activist based in Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Today, I want to share with you my story. I wish I could share with you a story of peace, but you know, unfortunately, I would share with you a story of war and the conflict from where I come from, the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. I was born and raised in Goma, in North Kivu, a place ravaged by civil war and humanitarian crisis. We have a huge humanitarian crisis with so many internal displaced population. North Kivu is often seen as a place of war and the conflict, and unfortunately so many people are suffering because of the conflict. I have witnessed as a kid poverty, human rights violations, rape, murder, street children, and destruction, you know, around me. And all which are, you know, the consequences of war in my hometown. This has led so many of my friends, my colleagues, people in my neighbor, you know, to lose hope and to not do anything. As you can see on this picture, that is Congo. And the photo in green, you know, it's very nice, it's beautiful. That is a very, like a visage, another face of the DRC. I think most of the time people never sure on media and everywhere, you know, it's like conflict and, you know, it's very difficult. But this is a place in Masisi territory in Goma, and you know it's very beautiful, it's very nice, and yeah, I think as you can see it's really natural. In the dry season, in the raining season, it's like all the time like that. It's very nice. On the red on the map is North Kivu, and that is where I live. I will talk a little bit about my family. I come from a very big family, as you can see on the photo. My brothers and my sisters, we are 12. And I think on the photo we miss like 2 people, one girl and a boy. And the 2 children are, yeah, I think they are my sister's kids. So my mom in the white in the middle, she's extraordinary and very strong woman, you know. Every year she had a new baby, and it was really like a tradition in her community to have babies every time. And most of women in my community was like taking care of babies, of kids, of the family, of their husbands, and sometimes having time for themselves, you know, it was very difficult. And because of marriage, my mom didn't finish her high school. In the marriage, it was not easy. As most of the time, and you know, she was economically dependent to my father because she couldn't work. She couldn't, for example, have a bank account. So it was just, you know, difficult. My father was like most Congolese men. You know, most of the time the family was not their priority or is not their priority. And for my father, the family was not the priority, true. And my mom, you know, she wanted education to be a priority for her children, you know, me and my sisters. And I think she does, or she did her best, you know, to make sure that we can have, or we can get a good education. And, you know, she tried to make sure that we can succeed in life. I remember I was only 4 years old when she decided to send me to school. On the photo, that is me at age of 4. And when she decided to send me to school, I was really excited to go to school for the first time, as you know, most of kids at my age. And I remember entering in the classroom. I felt, you know, very, very strange. Strange because it was very dark inside, no windows, and it was not clean. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? I can't spend my entire life, school life, you know, in a room like this. And yeah, I think I didn't like the school. When I came back home, I told my mom, you know, Mom, I think I will not go back to that school. I refuse to go to that school. And in my custom, you know, most of the time children, you know, they can't say no to their parents because it's like a tradition. Children have to respect their parents. But for me, I was like, no, I know I have to respect, but with this school, I think I can't. I said no. And for me, that is, I think, the first day I started to work as a human rights activist. Because I think, as a human rights activist, we don't have only to defend the right of others, but we have first to defend our own rights as a person and as women. So, yeah. When I think it come the time to go to university, my dad, you know, because he was like, he has to decide everything about his children. And my dad, you know, he decided to send me to Kinshasa, which is the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, to do what, you know, fashion designer. And I was like, oh my God, fashion designer. Fashion designer because it's like a technical stuff, and women in my community, they have to do, you know, like something like that, you know. And it was like a specific field, education field for women. And for me, I was like, no, I'm not seeing myself as a fashion designer, like maybe a big manager, something like that. And my father, we didn't have the same vision about, you know, yeah, what really like, I was really like want to become. When he asked me to go to Kinshasa, I also said no, I couldn't go to Kinshasa. Because for my father, he was like, if you don't want to go to Kinshasa to do fashion designer, that means I will not pay, I will not pay the fees school for you. And I was like, yeah, because in the high school, you know, he did the same thing. And, you know, I was like, I did fashion designer in the high school, and he tried to convince me to do the same thing in university, and I refused. I was like, no, I will not do that. I did management for development. You know, it was like something which was in Congo. Actually, I was trying to do journalism, but in Goma, in that time, we couldn't find a journalism school. I think after that, when I refused, you know, I was considered by my father as a rebel, because all the time I think I was like, I can't do this, I can't do that. And in my childhood, I witnessed so many human rights violations, women's rights violations too. And women, unfortunately, were suffering because of all those customs and traditions in my community. As a teenager, I wondered how I could try to change the situation of women around me and in my community. But because, those women were just obliged to keep silence because of custom and tradition in my community. At that time, my goal was, to find a way to change the situation and to make sure that, people can understand that as women we have a certain stature in our community. And, I was trying to work a lot to make sure that the stature of women can be respected and that those women who were obliged to keep silence, to find a way to express themselves about different problems they were facing in their community. And for me, I thought that a radio station was a good place, to make sure that women, could have access to, could speak and express themselves. That is me in my work, I think maybe 7 years ago, when I was working as a journalist, I think in 2003. I won an internship in a local radio station where I trained before I started working. At that time, most of women in my community, even those who were working for a radio station, they are like cleaners and at the reception. And, it was just difficult. And my editor-in-chief would not send me, for example, to the field because he thought that it was very dangerous for girls, for women to go in the field. When I talk about the field here in Congo, it's like remote rural areas where, we have so many rebel groups and it can be really dangerous for people to go there. But I told my editor-in-chief that if men can go to the field, why not women? Because, men are person, and I believe that if men can survive there, women could survive too. So for him it was like, you are a woman, you cannot go there, it's not safe for you, you have to be safe. And I was like, no, you have just to give me a chance to go there, and I will show through my work. You can judge me, not to judge me because of my gender, because I'm a woman, but through my work, I think you can be able to judge me. And I think he agreed to change his mind on me. So I've been able to go to the field, trying to cover different subjects related to politics, security, peace. I was able, for example, to meet and talk, have interviews with rebel groups chief. Sometimes, people fear a lot to meet those people, but, I was able to do that work. And as a journalist, I was covering very, very difficult question related to democracy and human rights. And of course, all those subjects covered by men and women, they are just sensitive subjects. But, with all the problem in Congo, I think as human rights defender or journalists, we have to talk to make sure that, the situation can change. So I decided to change the narrative through my work. And, I think at the end, editor-in-chief was really proud of my work, and because as a woman, it was easy for me to get interviews from politicians, for example, who sometimes refuse to give interviews to radio station. But sometimes when it's a woman who are asking an interview, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you will just talk, and we can have it. So working as a journalist was an important experience for me to give voice to women, but in the same time, to try to make sure that people can understand why it's very important to promote women's rights. And yeah, I was giving voice to voiceless in my community. But in the same time, as a female journalist, there is so many problems, discrimination against women journalists, because most of the time we are regarded by the community as prostitutes. And, it's very, very difficult. I remember some people in my community was calling me Dikedume, because they were thinking that I was like a boy and a girl in the same time, because with my word to wear, and yeah. But it was not like I was a boy, but the work would allow me to wear like a boy, because I should go in the field and try to do my work. But when they were calling me Dikedume, I was like, oh, it's fine. I'm just doing my work. And I would like you guys to have a look on this photo. This is Ruchuru. Ruchuru is in North Kivu, is one of the territory. And the photo is really very nice, no? Yeah, I think it's very nice. But in the photo, you can see maybe, we are seeing differently. We have a family, they just come from their farmer. And we have the mom and the girls, the mom, she the wife, she carries stuffs on her back, but in the same time, she has a baby on the neck. And all the people, on the other side, they carry stuffs, and they are walking. And the man, he's like the chief of the family. He has his bicycle, and the bicycle is empty. I mean, the back is empty, and he doesn't care. Even the wife, she has the baby on the neck and the stuff on the back. I think, it's like strange. And I think this picture is, the situation of women in my country, the inequality, gender inequality in my country. This is that picture. And the situation, I think, is really very bad. I think men has to understand that they have, to support their wife and make sure that, women's rights can be respected. That photo brings me here on barriers to women's political participation. And education, is the key, as we said, but most of the time in Congo, parents still choose to send boys to school and not girls, which leave them sometimes through early marriage or sexual abuse, sexual exploitation. We have custom and tradition, specifically religion, where we have a system which excludes women. And, sometimes when they are excluded, they just lose self-confidence, and it's just very, very difficult. Another barrier is the economic dependence and exclusion because of poverty. And I will try to emphasize, the power of money. And most of the time, men in my community refuse that their wife can work. Because, when you can work, you can have money. And when you have money, you have the power. And most of the time, they just refuse that women can work. And that is very, very difficult. Because when you are not working, you cannot, develop yourself. You can't have projects. And it can be very, very difficult. The conflict in the region is is a very difficult and a very big issue because the DRC has been in conflict for more than 2 decades with like 70 armed rebel groups. So with all of that, it's very, very difficult sometimes for women to participate when in the same time they have to take care of the family and, it's very difficult. Because of the conflict, there are so many cases of sexual violence which are reported, sexual slavery, child sexual abuse, and I think it's just very, very difficult, for women. The big barriers is the corruption and impunity in, I think, all the system in Congo. In the judiciary system, in the education system. I think for my opinion, the internal system in Congo has to change to make sure that we can take into account, all this situation. I would like now to talk a little bit, because I don't have more time, about my work with EdProfen. In 2011, when I was working for the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, some cases of sexual violence have been reported in Mugunga IDP camp, which is an internal displaced population in my country. Within the camp, the different cases of sexual violence have been reported there. And for me as a journalist, it was like, okay. Yeah, I think this is a good story. I have to report about this. I went to the camp for my work to report, but the time, I met all those women in the camp, when I took a photo like this, it was very, very painful. It was very difficult for me as a journalist to just report about the situation and leave. I was like, I asked myself, Passy, are you only going to report about this and leave these women and children in this situation? I couldn't, because, I was shocked by the situation. And, I decided to do something to support these women and children who are suffering. When I went back home, I talked to some of my friends, to people, and I say to them, you guys, you have to support me. And some of my friends were believing in me and, in what I was doing, promoting women and children rights. They decided to support my work. And, I have been able to take some of these children in an orphanage, in a center, to take care of them, to give them like food, shoes, and, to try really to support them. And that was good. I was like, okay, I'm able to do something. And to also support those women who were victims of sexual and gender-based violence in the IDP camp. I will talk a little bit about the pillar of EdProfen. We promote gender equality in Eastern Congo, and we empower women and girls affected by conflict. We try to prevent sexual and gender-based violence. As you saw in the photo, we have too much work to do. And through the work, we are trying to reduce the inequality which exists actually between men and women. We promote democracy, peace, and the respect of human rights. We also do advocacy work at the government level and also in the international community. Our achievements, we most of the time do monitoring of human rights violation. We last year, for example, we have been able to produce a report on sexual slavery and child sexual abuse around mining sites in the Eastern Congo, in Masisi. Because, most of the time when we have mining sites, we also have, people working in the mine trying to exploit children and women, unfortunately to abuse women and children. We provide psychological support to survivors of sexual violence. We have the orphanage to take care of children who have lost the track of their relatives and their parents during the conflict. And at Profen, as Sally said, we have the Education Center on Democracy and Human Rights, where we make sure that, women can have access to different resources so that, they can be able to participate maybe at different level, but also in politics, because I believe that women in politics, they can try to change the narrative. They can change the situation of women in the DRC. EdProfen is also an active member of different coalitions because I think working alone is okay, it's fine. But when different organizations, when women can be able to work together, that could help, to try to change the situation and make sure that women's voice can be heard. Talking about my work, I will tell you the story of these ladies. Her name is Acheni Fitina. Acheni, she is 35 years old, and she is a mother of 9 children, And she doesn't know the father, unfortunately, of the 6th child. You will ask me why, because she was raped by 3 armed rebel soldiers in her own village. When she has been raped, she gets pregnant, and she has the baby. And for her, it was really very, very difficult to talk about that situation, because most of the time, if people know that you have been raped, you can be abandoned, rejected by the member of the community. And Acheni decided to keep silence. But, even you keep silence, when you give birth, the baby will maybe look very, very different to other children in the family. With the time, she decided to tell the truth to his husband, but the day she decided to tell the truth, I think that day was the beginning of so many problems in her life, because the husband he was calling her, any kind of degrading name in front of children, asking her to go to find the baby's fathers, and eventually told her he couldn't live with a victim of rape. So, the husband decided to leave Acheni because she was the victim. And that is the situation of most of victims of sexual violence. They can be rejected, abandoned by their family. And I think when Acheni joined our small group of women, we have in Nyiragongo territory, we knew that it was very important, to try to make sure that Acheni can be independent and develop her leadership skills so that, she could find a way to support herself, but also to take care of her children. And Acheni cases is not like a unique case in the DRC. It's a microcosm of a larger reality of women in DRC who are everyday victims of sexual and gender-based violence, victims of sexual slavery, and so many things. The situation is very difficult. EdProfen was able to meet Acheni's husband, tried to explain to him that it was important, even Acheni was victim of sexual violence, to continue to love her, to support her. but you know, sometimes it's very difficult for men in such situation to understand. The process to unify the family was very, very long. When a family is destroyed by the conflict, it can be very long, and you know, it can be very bad. And the case of Acheni took us very long time to make sure that the husband could understand why it's very important to continue supporting her wife. But with the time, you know, we have been able to put them together, and the husband understood that it was very important to continue to support her. So we have been able to unify them, and yeah, I think that is one of our success stories, and you know, an example of the work we are doing in the DRC. But this Acheni story is an example of sacrifice and hard work. Most of the time, peace builders and human rights activists can face, you know, doing their work. And yeah, most of the time ourselves as human rights activists, we face difficult situation, and you know, it's very, very hard sometimes. The photo is the children on the center, the children we support. And this is like one of our important program we have in Congo, because you know, promoting or empower women, it's good, you know, to have like training, but we believe through sport we can really try to empower women and make them, you know, to feel, to have their mind open, you know, to feel free. And this is Masisi, and in Masisi we organize different activities: running, walking, hiking, and so many things, and it's very, very funny. And women and girls who participate in this program, you know, we can see the change, and you know, the way they feel confident after these activities during our discussion, and you know, we believe it's a very, very good program. We also do training with women in politics, so you know, to make sure that women can have, you know, different resources and they can participate. Doing this work, we have different challenges. And I've talked about this before, and security in the conflict, and the conflict in DRC is, you know, the huge challenge, with more than 2 decades of the conflict and 70 armed rebel group. The conflict between the law and the custom in Congo is very, very difficult, because sometimes, you know, it's just difficult because the law is clear about something, for example, women political participation, but the custom in Nyiragongo, women cannot be local chief. And when they can't be local chief, you know, it's like that in their community. And when you come, for example, with, you know, the article say that and that and that, they are like, no, this is what we know since so many years in our community. This is how things work in our community. So this is very, very difficult. The social decay with lack of trust among people in the community. We have so many violence, because in Congo, you know, we have like 300 tribes, and most of the time those tribes fight, you know, against themselves, sometimes for land, for the control of mining, and it's very, very difficult sometimes. Gender issues are not priority for the Congolese government. There is no money allocated for gender equality in the national budget, for example. And even, you know, women are 56% of the population. And when they try to exclude 56% of the population, I think, you know, it's just difficult. We can't have development when, you know, we try to exclude the majority of the population. And also, donors focus find on survival of sexual and gender-based violence, which is really very, very important. But I think, we have to put more funds, on preventing sexual and gender-based violence to make sure that, we can avoid having those kind of activities. We have Congo fatigue. Congo fatigue, people are just tired about the situation in Congo. They are like, you guys, you have been in Congo in conflict for more than 2 decades, and since all those time we have been able to support you. Yeah, I think now they are tired, but people are still suffering, and I think Congolese people need a particular attention to make sure that we can end, this conflict which has been very, very long. To finish, I have different recommendations to the Congolese government. I don't know if they are here, but it could be good. To try to resolve the conflict between the Congolese law and the tradition, which, is a very, very difficult situation in the country actually. The DRC has ratified, different international law. I think it's very, very important for the government to respect, all those international law which have been ratified. To prioritize gender equality and to make sure that women and children can be protected. A recommendation to the civil society. I think as civil society members, we have to continue to promote women's rights, to develop projects, which take gender equality into account. And for me, taking gender equality into account is not only the number of women we reach in the project, but we have to develop projects which reduce gender inequality, and in that way, we can be able to reduce and to make sure that women, can live their lives. We have to create an inclusive space of dialogue between men and women, because I think this is really important. Most of the time, we try only to work with women or girls, and we forget men. But, most of the time, men in my country are responsible of so many women's rights violations. I think we have to create this space to make sure that, together we can find a way to promote and support women leaders in our community, to make sure that women can participate. The last recommendation is to the international community and donors to allocate more funds, as I said before, to prevent sexual and gender-based violence in our community, to keep pressing the Congolese government, to fulfill its agreement to hold free and fair election. Because in Congo, the election actually at this time is one of the main problems which is responsible of so many human rights violations, specifically in Beni, Lubero, and Rutshuru, where we have massacre of people, where people are kidnapped. Yeah, the situation is really very bad. I think we have to keep pressing the Congolese government to make sure that, we can have election. And this one is like, a small poem. I wish it could be in French. I could, saying it like in French. But women and girls, I really believe that women and girls are human beings. And women and girls are not victims. We are not victims as women. Women and girls need to be given dignity and the opportunity to speak for themselves. Women and girls are autonomous actors who can make a difference in their community. Women and girls should be recognized and given support by the government and their family. And the last one, we need to believe in women and girls. And by believing in women and girls, we can promote them, we can protect them, we can do everything with them. Thank you.
Passy, thank you very much for sharing with us your personal journey, which very much represents the situation in your country for women and girls. Thank you. And I will now turn the floor to Rudy for his comments as discussant. Rudy.
First, I'd like to thank the Forum and the Reagan Fussell Fellowship team specifically for organizing this discussion and giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and thoughts on this topic. Second, I'd like to thank Passy, not only for her excellent presentation, but also for a great contribution to the fellowship team. For several years, we have struggled to recruit a fellow from the DRC. She is our first fellow from the DRC, and we certainly hope that she won't be our last. For the sake of time, my brief remarks will touch on one aspect of Passy's presentation, and that is addressing the institutional barriers to women's political participation. As many of you already know, for more than 2 decades, the Africa team has made the DRC a priority of our grants program. In recent years, we've devoted a modest amount of resources to women's political participation. For example, since 2015, we made no less than 30 grants to tackle this issue, most of them implemented by women-led organizations. So why women's political participation matters in the DRC? There are several reasons, but again, to save time, I'll name just a few. The first and most obvious one is the fact that women represent 56% of the DRC's population. A second reason is the urgent need to empower Congolese women to deal with issues they know best: female literacy, sexual and gender-based violence, domestic violence, child neglect, gender discrimination. The list is long. I go on and on. I can go on and on. The third reason I want to bring up is connected to the previous one. There is no better way to empower women than by electing a maximum of women to public office. How do you accomplish this? By encouraging political parties, encouraging and requiring political parties to field more female candidates. This is something I can add to Passy's list of recommendations. The way things are set up in the DRC, a woman needs the full backing of a political party in order to be elected, and sometimes that's not even enough. The new electoral law does not favor independent candidates, and besides, very few men, let alone women, have the financial means to do so. I will elaborate on this during the Q&A. To conclude, I'll say that an increase in women's political participation can revolutionize DRC's democratic governance. Since independence, men have failed miserably. So perhaps it's time to try to go in a different direction, to give educated women a chance to rule. And that starts by creating the conditions for them to become more politically active.
Thank you very much, Rudy. Well, we have much to discuss. The floor is open for questions. If you could identify yourself and keep your comments relatively brief. Yes.
Hi. My name is Lindsay Robinson. I'm with the National Democratic Institute.
Hello.
Hi. Passy, I've met you in the past, and as I mentioned, but when we met, the National Democratic Institute, NDI, is training women, potential candidates and candidates ahead of the elections this year. And something that I want to have your thoughts on are what are the key recommendations or arguments that you can find to help women overcome the cultural barriers that they face? How can you help them convince their husbands and fathers and community members to accept that they're politically active?
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for the question. I think this is a very, very important question. How we can help women to overcome cultural barriers in terms of their political participation. I think cultural barriers, as I said, is really very, very strong. And most of the barriers we face, I think the big one for women political participation is the lack of education, which is really very, very big, and also access to different resources. For example, for those who wish, to participate or to be candidates, most of the time they ask them to pay a caution, and that caution can cost, a lot of money. And most of the time in Congo, we have seen that all the time a man candidates, when he need like that caution, he can sell even, their lands, their house, to make sure that he can have those money. But when it comes to the wife or the woman, it can be very, very difficult. Most of the time, women are not economically independent, and the fact that they are not economically independent put them, to be to avoid sometimes to present their to present themselves as candidates. So I really believe that if we try to encourage them, to be economically independent, that could help a lot. But also, most of the time, we have seen that women have the lack to access to different resources. Sometimes they doesn't know how what the Constitution say about women participation, and I think it's really very important to give them all those trainings and resources to make sure that they can understand and they can have all language to participate. Yeah.
Passy, to follow up, do you have an example of when you saw that men in the community were able to be convinced to allow women in their community to participate? Have you looked at that through Aide Profen at all?
We work a lot, in terms of political participation. I remember one day in Ruchuru, not Ruchuru, Nyiragongo, we was in an activity, and it was like I don't know how we call it in English. In French, it's théâtre ambulant. Théâtre ambulant.
Oh, interesting.
A local theater?
A local theater. Yeah, theater. And, we try to create like a kind of situation, to make sure that people in the community can understand why it's very important for women to participate. And one man who was in that activity, he asked me a question. Passy, what do you think? He is like a motorcycle. In Nyiragongo, we have those, we call it chukudu. Chukudu is like a motorcycle, but which is produced locally. And most of men in Nyiragongo, they use that motorcycle for transportation, and that is the work of that man. And he asked me the question, what do you think if, for example, my wife, she became a member of the parliament? do you think she will keep, respect me and give me the same love as, I'm really poor. I'm not sure if she became like a member of the parliament, we will have the same life. And it was like a normal question, but I told him, if your wife, just imagine a second, if your wife is a member of the parliament, do you think you will stay in the same life? She will be, she will have like a statue in the community, and I'm sure she will try to help you and, to make sure that you will be okay. And the man was like, okay, I see, I understand. So we need to try to work and try to sensitize people in the community, men in the community, to understand that they have to support women, their wife, and make sure that, because if a woman can become a member of the parliament in the family, of course, she will support the family and, it's for the benefit of the family. Yeah.
Rudy, any thoughts?
Lindsay, it's a really good question. Beyond the cultural barriers, you also have to take into account the institutional barriers, as I mentioned during my remarks. Convincing men to allow their their wives to be candidates is not enough. You need to convince the political parties to do so. There is no legal framework in the DRC that obliges political parties to field a minimum number of female candidates. There isn't. If something that could be useful would be a zebra list, as we see in some countries. For every man, there is a woman running. DRC uses an open list, meaning that voters get to see exactly who's on the list. And most of the time, women are at the bottom of that list, so it doesn't really help. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yes, this gentleman here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Great presentation, Passy, and thanks, Rudy, for your comments. Also, my name is Sasha Lezhnev. I'm with the Enough Project here in Washington. My question for you is, if indeed we will have elections this year in Congo, what are your ideas to try to put more women's and gender issues on the map? Obviously, all the main candidates are men at the moment, for president anyway. But was wondering if you have further ideas along the lines of, getting into their platforms, if some of them have platforms I've seen, some of them I haven't seen, and we don't know what Bemba is going to do, of course. But or there are organizations like yours, or could you tell us some organizations that are planning to put out statements or press releases or events and so forth to make sure that women's issues are on the map in the political, in the election process, again, if we do have elections in Congo? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is the big question if we will have election in Congo, actually. We are trying to push and make sure, that the president can fulfill his own engagement to organize election, because as I said, for people in Congo, the election is now a priority because we don't have election. There are so many human rights violations which are actually committed. I think what we can do actually, most of the time people wait when we have election to start, developing different projects on promoting women participation. But I think we don't have to wait the day of election, to start working on that. That is why, for example, with NED support, we all the time, develop different activities to make sure that even, 2-3 years ago, before the election, women can have access to different resources, can have different training to make sure that they can have, all resources they need. and, you know, to make sure that when the election will arrive, they can be able, you know, to respond, you know, they can be ready to be not only as voters, but also present themselves as candidates or can vote for other women. Because, you know, the problem of customs in Congo, most of the time, even, you know, we have like 2 candidates, and we have a man and a woman. Most of people, you know, they will not vote for the woman because they will say, no, Passy, she's a woman. I know, we don't want a woman, we just want a man. Even Passy has, you know, all criteria. Even she's the best of the candidates, you know, because of the customs, most of the time they never just believe in women, and, you know, it's very strange. I remember we have been in different trainings, and I was giving the training on leadership, and I was asking to the member of the community to give different criteria to be leaders. And, you know, for men and women, which one of them has, you know, all the criteria. And most of the time in all my trainings, you know, women are the one who has, you know, like all the criteria, you know, in the list. But when you ask them why they never vote or elect women as leaders, as chief, they are like, oh no, we don't know why, but, you know, I think, you know, there are like so many prejudice against and discrimination against women, and I think we have to work on that and try to change the mind of people in the way they consider women.
Yes, there's a question here, and then I'll go over to that side.
Hi, my name is Catherine Doyle. I'm from the Pulitzer Center, and I was wondering if there's any sort of generational distinction between the ways that women are perceived in politics.
Generational differences, or younger
Generational. Oh, okay.
differences.
She was speaking quickly here.
Generational differences in how women are perceived.
Yeah, I think we have a big generation differences, because I think the way, for example, in the civil society, for example, in Congo, we have like 2 generations. The senior one and the youngest. And even, you know, we have also different way to think about our work and our responsibility as civil society members. And in that way, for example, you can see young people are most of the time in different youth movements. We can go in the streets, you know, to try to advocate for our rights. But the senior generation, they are like, no, as civil society, yeah, we can't do that. You know, we have to talk with the governments, and of course we have to talk to the government. But I think, in the same time, as young people, we have a different way to see things, and that is very, very important. I don't say that I don't support, you know, the senior generation, because we work a lot with them, and they help us a lot in terms of advice and how we can do our work. But I think it's like we are complementary, and we try to work together, but we think differently. And actually, I think with the new generation, I have hope that, you know, the situation in Congo can change, because I believe that the future of Congo, the future of Africa is in the end of youth, of young people, and we have to work with both young people, men and women, to make sure that they can understand that they have to work hard to make sure that the situation in Congo can change.
To add on to what Passy said, the younger generation is definitely interested in entering politics. However, they confront a lot of obstacles, I should say, because of the total disregard, from the older generation, the lack of trust the older generation has for youth activists or young politicians. So it's not necessarily lack of will to enter politics. It's more about opportunity, and there are very few opportunities for youth to enter politics, to get into positions of power.
This lady here had a question.
Hi, my name is Olive Martin. Je voudrais vous remercier d'être ici et partager votre expérience avec nous. It was really nice that you could just share everything that you have experienced in DRC with us, and I really appreciate it. My question is to the women who are voting. What's the portion of the voting population that is women, and have you seen any trends as to them increasing or decreasing, or are there any workshops that you've been putting on to get them to be more participatory and increase their civic engagement?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I really think the portion is like 51% of participation. And yeah, it's very, very important in terms of we really have to work hard to make sure that, women can participate. With the net support, as I said, we have the Education Center on Democracy and Human Rights, where we make sure that women specifically, can have access to different resources. And with all those resources, it's the way to prepare them to make sure that they can read, for example, our Constitution. We have the Constitution. I don't know the case here, but most of the time people, they just don't know what is exactly in the Constitution. But, it's like an important document. It's a key document. And we believe that, people have to know exactly the content of that document. So we organize, for example, different activities where we try to explain different articles, so that women can understand. And yeah, I think that is our way to make sure that women can have, all those resources and they can participate. Of course, there are so many challenges. But we believe that we are actually doing something with the support of our partners like NET, to make sure that we can be able to change the situation.
And do you notice women voting? What has been your experience?
Women voting, I think the participation is still very, very low, because most of the time we have like our carte d'électeur, which is like a document we have to use as our national identity card. And with that document, for example, people are obliged to go to the CENI to identify themselves. And in that way they participate not only as voters, they participate as voters, not candidates. And most of the time when they are candidates, they are not elected, by the member of the community, because most of the time they just don't trust in them. And we are trying to work to make sure that, we can change the situation. And it's very, very hard and difficult. But, because, changing a system, changing a custom, a tradition can take a long time. So we try to work on it, but, it's not easy.
Frank, say a few words about women's voting in your view.
Well, the women's participation in the electoral process, if the turnout levels among women is low, it's not because they lack the information about their rights to participate in that process. It's more about, at least from my experience dealing with civil society in the DRC, it's more about being disillusioned with the system. What difference is it going to make whether we vote or not? And this is why grantees have been organizing a lot of awareness campaigns, town hall meetings, any activity to encourage citizens to vote, women and youth, all segments of society, because it's an important step in the democratic process. It's certainly one step towards making the DRC a more democratic country. So it's not really about not having information about their right to vote. It's just because they don't feel like it will make a difference.
Thank you. Xerxes Spencer. Oh, I see many hands. So let's take a couple of questions.
Passy, thank you for your very eloquent presentation. Your resilience and your perseverance is incredibly inspiring in the face of all the challenges that you face in the DRC. I wanted to ask you, I think you're absolutely right that boys and men are a big part of the problem, but to what extent do you find that women and girls are also a part of the problem? To what extent have women and girls internalized the patriarchy that has been passed down from generation to generation, such that they themselves believe that their own role in life is simply within the four walls of their home? And how do you and Aid Profen seek to combat that? You are a tremendous inspiration to the girls and women of your country. And so my other question is, from where do you draw your inspiration, and how can models of leadership for girls and women be cultivated so that they can assume positions of leadership within and beyond the four walls of their home? Thank you.
Thank you, Xerxes, for the question. Yeah, I agree with you. I think men are not only the problem. The problem is also women. As you said, most of the time, they themselves, they are like, oh, yeah, we have been trained, raised in this way. As women, we cannot work, we just depend on men. And most of the time, for example, women, even they have like a degree in, I don't know what, but, they are like, oh, yeah, I will wait, and my husband will be working, and, he will take care of me and my family. I think all my work, the work I do in Congo is, I have so many meetings and conversation with girls, because, most of the time working with senior, it's like adults, it's good, they can change, but to change them is very, very difficult sometimes, because, they've been raised in that way. But those ones who are young, the young women, girls, I have different meetings with them, and I try to share with them my experience, to explain to them why it's very important for them to become economically independent. And, I think through all those conversations, I have, for example, mentorship programs, when I try to push some, giving them different advices on, how they can succeed. Because, the problem is that most of the time, people really believe in marriage. I don't say that, I'm not okay with marriage, but, at age of 18, 19, 20, most of the time when just they finish with the high school, the first thing to do is to get married. And, with the situation in Congo, when you are married, that means you cannot go to school. You can't continue with university. It's very, very difficult. So I say to them, of course, you can love someone, you can do whatever you want, but just finish your school. And when you have done with school, you can get a job and you can get a man who really loves you and you can live with that person. Carol. And of course, it's not easy to convince them, but I try to explain to them. And yeah, I think there are some who actually understand that it's very important for them to be economically independent and then get married.
So I saw several hands. What I'd like to do is allow everyone to ask their questions so that we get the range. So this lady here, that gentleman. Okay, we'll just let the mic go around.
So I am an intern in the Wilson Center, the Global Women Leadership Initiative. My name is Yue. So my question is that you mentioned that there are a lot of families in Congo tend to be large. They tend to have a lot of children. So I'm just wondering that how do women who want to participate in politics strike a balance between life, between family and work? What are some good strategies that you have seen, and what are some examples that might be instructive on that problem?
Yeah.
So we're going to take a number of questions since we're
Okay.
running out of time. And this lady and the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Elsa, and I'm a fellow at the U.S. African Development Foundation. I'm sorry if you already answered this question, but I would like to know if people's perception that there may be voter fraud deter them from voting.
Okay, voter fraud.
Voter
might be.
fraud?
And this, yes.
My name is Resla. I'm an intern with the Africa team here, and my question is for the women who are running for office, what kind of strategies are they doing to ensure their campaigns are much better despite the prejudice that exists, and how are they accessing funding even if they're losing, and what are they trying to do better if they try and run again?
Okay, so those are three pretty big questions. Maybe we'll take those. And then on this side of the room, there was one here. So let's take these three, and then we'll have one more round. So the large family striking a balance. Voter fraud, is that a deterrent? Do people feel that it's corrupt, the system? And also strategies for campaigning, getting funding and overcoming barriers.
Family and work. Yeah, I think all the time it's very difficult to deal with the family and work. Usually when you have so many children, it can be very tough, very difficult. But I think nothing is easy in the world. And when you want to work, I think you can find a way to try to find a solution. Of course, children need the attention of their parents. Parents have to be there to make sure that they have a good education, and But I think working, is also very important. I know, for example, here in the U.S., men can work and women can work. It's like complementary. But in Congo, most of the time, women are the ones who have to take care of children, who have some time to work. I think I can't say that women doesn't work in Congo. They work, to go to the farm, it's a kind of work. But, the resources they get from the farmer, from the farm is used most of the time by men, which is very, very bad. But I think it's very important to balance, between how to manage kids and how to try to make sure that you can work and be economically independent. The second question is about the voter fraud. I think this is a big reality in Congo. Most of the time, I remember in 2011, we were like, this is not the reality, and it's like politics, and the situation can be difficult. And most of the time, women can be afraid, with that kind of system, which is designed by corruption and so many problems. And that is why when we promote democracy and try to do advocacy at the national and international level to make sure that we can have a system which protects population and avoids those kind of frauds during the election. In DRC, for example, we have actually the machine à voter. I think people think that machine could be responsible of so many frauds during the election. And unfortunately, for example, all those older people in Masisi, in Beni, I think using a phone is very difficult. I don't know how it can be possible for them to use that kind of machine. But even it's a manual one, most of the time there are frauds, and I don't know how we can avoid that. Actually, I don't have an answer to that question. Maybe Rudy can help me, but I don't know.
Voter fraud is an issue, that needs to be dealt with everywhere. I mean, if I knew for a fact that my vote will be stolen, I wouldn't even bother voting. I don't think anyone would. But there are ways to combat this. There are ways to address this issue, and civil society organizations in the DRC have come up with a multitude of activities when it comes to thwarting voter fraud. You can train people on how to observe elections. You can have people posted at polling stations. There are several ways to diminish the level of fraud, but you can't totally eradicate it. That's just not feasible.
And the third question, when women run in office, how did do they organize themselves to try to have funds and strategies? I think it's very difficult because most of the time political parties in Congo doesn't give money to women, to people, and they have to find their own strategies to finance their campaign, which is very difficult most of the time. So that way exclude women who doesn't have money. And it's very, very difficult. But I think the other strategies for women who are running, is also to try to work with men, because most of the time, they try to work alone and try to mobilize other women. But, through our training, we show them that men and women are potential voters, and they have to work with both to make sure that, men can understand that they can trust in women and they can vote for them. But financially, it's always difficult.
Fundraising is really important anywhere in politics. In the case of the DRC, political parties don't receive grants from the state. In Europe, it's actually another reality. A lot of political parties during the elections receive something from the state. It's not the case in the DRC. The largest political parties, the main ones, they tend to raise more funds than smaller parties, and of course they do give some funds to specific female candidates, but it's not enough to get a lot of them elected. If I can go over the stats, in the National Assembly, you only have 44 female members of parliament out of 492. It's a really small number. In the Senate, 5 women out of 108 senators. So it's clearly an issue of funding here being visible, and unfortunately, without the backing of the party, you really can't do a lot of fundraising. It's a serious problem.
Okay, our final round, this lady here will ask, and Dave Peterson will ask the last 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, my name is Claire Anderson. I work with the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really empowering or amazing to hear the stories of women that are working in these smaller rural areas to change their realities. My question for you is in reference to the impunity and corruption that you referenced as a barrier. And my question for you is whether women, especially in IDP camps in rural areas, view the lack of justice for perpetrators of sexual violence. Is that lack of justice a barrier to their participation economically or politically, or is it seen more as something that maybe they tackle once they do have more access to economic or political power? Thank you.
The last word, last question to Dave Peterson of NED.
Hi, Passy. Beyond formal politics, could you say a little bit about women's involvement in civil society? I think in particular, working with civil society throughout Africa, but certainly including Congo, there's so many NGOs. You go in and meet with them, and it's all men. There are very few women that one generally finds involved in civil society. We saw a film here a couple of days ago about some of the protests in Brazzaville, and with the citizen movements especially. Sally just mentioned that one of the leaders of Lucha had been killed, but in the film you see these crowds of hundreds and hundreds of people protesting, and there's almost no women. So could you say to what extent you have found some sort of welcome from the citizen movements and civil society in general for women, and how can you increase women's participation in civil society?
2 small questions for you, Rudy.
Small. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. The first one, Claire, about impunity and corruption in the system, in Congo system. I think the lack of justice is something we have seen in Congo, specifically for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. For example, with the system, they can go to justice. The perpetrators of sexual violence can go to justice, but after maybe 2-3 days or 1 week, they can be released by the government. And in that time, for example, it's like a serious security problem, for different organizations who have been involved, in that case, to make sure that, that person can be, can go and pay, for what he did. And unfortunately, with that system, which is like corrupted, it's very, very difficult. Sometimes most of women who are victims of not only sexual violence, so many other cases, they just decide sometimes to keep silence or, to try to do like local mediation when there are so many problems of sexual violence. And for me, that is, unacceptable, because, those who author of sexual violence have to be punished for what they did. And unfortunately, we have a system which is really very corrupted. Most of the time, in rural areas, they can give a cow, they can give money, and they can be released. And we are trying actually to make sure that, the justice can be reinforced, and they can make sure that women and girls can have access to justice. Because most of the time, the one, as I said, who has money are men, and they can give money as they want. But women are most of the time poor. They don't have money. Even for justice, if it's in terms of corruption, I think, I don't know, I can't say that women are not corrupted, but I think most of the time they are poor, they don't have money. Dave question. This is a difficult question. Why we don't have women in protestation? We see only men and young people. I think it's very, very difficult. In the civil society, as we said, we don't have more women. Women are, we have few. But I think there are different ways women are involved in the peace process and different activities. Even myself, I ask myself most of the time why we don't have women engaged, because, with the conflict, women are the first victims. And, to keep silence about the situation which is currently happening in Congo, it's just unacceptable for women. That is why, for example, I'm in a process to try to create like a movement of women to make sure that as women we can be able to try to work together to unify our strength and make sure that we can make our voice heard. Because, sometimes when you are doing action or doing something, it's okay. But I'm really sure, I truly believe that if women, can go, for example, in the street, we have seen example of Liberia and many other countries where women have been able to change the narrative. And I think for the Congo situation, women has to play an important role, and we'll try to work hard and make sure that this can be possible by here I'm trying to create like a kind of network with other women movement around the world and make sure that we can have support from other women and try to unify our voice.
Well, Passy, on that note, let me say that you are extraordinary with a remarkable life story. Most of all, your perseverance, your courage, and your spirit are inspirational. So thank you, merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you to Rudy, and thank you to the audience for your participation and support.